one more week to go get your Mirabelle promos and what is going on in the Lorcana meta game. We have a couple deck lists to go over. We're going to hop onto that spreadsheet too so you can see all that information. Information is linked down below. You can go check out that spreadsheet anytime you want. Open to anyone who has the link, and I post it in every single video, so it's pretty much out there for everyone. I'm finalizing up things with Medify. They reached out and asked me about doing courses or coaching and things like that. So I know I've hinted at it a few times. It's trying to find time to do it and set it up is actually a lot more work than I planned on. But getting that all finalized up, so soon I'll have all that information. But I'm really excited for it. It's being a big blast. Again, it's just taking a lot of time. But anyway, we're going to have all that stuff coming up. We got a few deck lists to go over. These are from a 700 person tournament that was just took place over in Europe. I know other creators have already done breakdowns on it all, so I'm not just going to break down the event because other people already have. Go check out like Forbidden Mountain. Go check out Speci. They already did it. I'm just going to look at a few deck lists and then look at the format as a whole, as well as which decks are performing in set championships. And we have a new #1 deck again. We did this 2 weeks ago, and Green Steel took over as the most Mirabelle winning deck. However, it has fallen. It is no longer #1. So what deck is #1? You're going to have to wait a little bit because we got a deck list to look over. This was a top 64 at that 700 person event. It is obviously repeat. It was piloted by Hugo. And when we look at the deck on turn 1, we're playing 10 1-drops. We have Chernobog's Followers and Magic Broom. If you're not playing the Robin Hood line, Followers and Broom are pretty much the go-to 1-drops that you're going to see, whether you play 4-4 or like 4-3. 7 or 8 is kind of the standard. Fire the Cannons is just a great option to hit a Diablo, to hit characters early on, to hit that aggro aspect of decks. I'm not huge on Fire the Cannons personally. I like Smash a lot more, which we do see in the deck list too. Like I said, I like Smash way more. Fire the Cannons, I don't know. I get it. I like Fire the Cannons more than Baboom because it costs less, and if you have the uninkable room, absolutely, I like Fire the Cannons more. Because, again, I'm not huge on Fire the Cannons, so naturally I'm not huge on Baboom neither. I'm still not huge on the card, but I understand why you're playing it. Green Steel didn't perform. I don't want to say it didn't perform great because it ended up finishing first in the event, but it didn't perform as dominant as it has been, I guess is the best way to put it. We get into our 2-drops. This is pretty standard here. The 4 Snake, the 4 Smees. This ratio here doesn't really change a whole lot. Usually, again, you have the Followers, Broom on 1. Sometimes you'll see Robin Hood on 1, and then you have the Snake or Smee on 2, and then you get into those 3-drops. And 3-drops are where the deck really starts to just get pretty big. This deck has a very high 3-peak curve. If you're wondering what that means, well, it's a deck building term. It's your deck ink curve, and, well, 3 is the peak, and this deck has a very tall peak. 4 friends on the other side. Anytime you're playing Amethyst, you're just going to play it. Draw 2 cards is broken. Lawrence being able to have 4 strength if he has no damage means it's a great answer to things like Daisy Duck. Great things to answer like Sisu. Really strong card, and a quest for 2, and it's inkable, so it's a nice way to get aggressive. This deck can do that very well through things like Smee and Lawrence, and just be able to apply a lot of early pressure on your opponent, which is another reason I personally do like the Robin Hood shift line, just as another way to really get aggro on your opponent when you need to. Madam M Fox and Crab. I like the 4-2 ratios here a lot. I've seen Crab being played at 3. I've seen Crab being played at 4. Personally, I think 2 is right. I completely agree with the 2 Crabs. I like that a lot. 3 Peats, again, I agree with that too. Most decks you want to play 4 Pete because you want to see it more and you want to be able to use him more. However, in this deck, you have the consistency of the Amethyst engine to be able to get to Pete more often and consistently. But in addition to that, you have the bounce package, so you can reuse one singular Pete more often than you would be able to in any other deck. 2 Smash, I like that a lot. Like I said, I'm huge on Smash this format. It takes out Diablo at the Cove. It takes out an Ursula. It takes out Ariel. It takes out Queen. It takes out so many characters, and I really, really like Smash right now. 2 Strength of the Raging Fire. I get it. It's inkable. It doesn't trigger Diablo, but I'm not overly huge on this card in this deck, but I understand why it's being played. Like, it's there as more utility. Again, Let the Storm Rage on will trigger a Diablo that's exerted, and it's uninkable, whereas this is inkable, and there's the potential to be able to do even more damage if you go wider on your board. So I completely understand why they're playing it. I'm just not sure that I necessarily would if it was me, and I say that as someone who's been playing the deck and not playing the card. But anyway, Strength of the Raging Fire is a great tech card for the deck, and it can do wonders in the right scenario. 2 libraries. This card pairs up really nice with your followers and your broom to be able to get like a double draw off of it. The 8 willpower's a trouble to deal with. I'm just not a huge fan of it for the simple reason that, like, followers and broom, you typically want to play your followers and broom like turns 1 and 2 like in the early game, right? And then you don't want to have them still on turn 4. Ideally, you use them and you already got your draw off before that. But by the time you play library and then pay the ink to move there, you need 4 ink minimum. So it's a turn 4 option. It's a nice play late game to get like a draw 2, right? It's a good late game play to draw 2. Other than that, I think library has a lot of niche and specific scenarios that it's really good. Just overall, I think Queen's Castle it's too good. Like, I have won games I should have lost just because I top decked into a Queen's Castle. That doesn't quite happen with library. So I'm so biased in that I think that Queen's Castle is just the best location in the game, period. And again, like I said, I've won games because you have castle and your opponent just can't out it, or you have like 2 or 3 castles down and you just win the game because your opponent can't deal with them fast enough once they start piling up, and then you just use your characters to take out theirs, and it feels bad for them. We have 3 Along Came Zeus. Really like this card right now too. Sometimes I'll go like 2 Zeus, 1 Swords if you're expecting more aggro in the format. Being a big event like this, you can kind of expect those top 5 decks to really be dominant, being Steel Song, Green Steel, Popsicle, Tempo, and Ruby Amethyst. So I 100% agree with the more Zeuses and less on the aggro counters. Not really expecting aggro to be overly abundant, and that's perfectly fine. But again, if your local is, then maybe you want to look at something like a Grab Your Swords instead. Instead of 3. Definitely want to play at least 2 Zeuses still, though. We got 4 goats, 4 crabs, 4 goats, 4 rabbits in our 4-drop spot. Then rounding it out, I actually like 3 goats. Like, goat, you ink goat early if you see it. Like, you never really want to see goat early, otherwise it just turns into ink, and then you already know you inked it, and it's just like, okay, I already inked the one. And at the same time, you can say, yeah, but then if you don't see it early, your chances of drawing it later are better, and that's absolutely true. I'm not going to argue with you whatsoever because I can't. I'd be wrong. I mean, I could argue with you, but I'd still be wrong. It's just a fact. That's how it is. But if you're looking for a card, you're looking for a space, you want to play this card because it's really good. It's what you want. It's what you need. Absolutely 3 goats, perfectly fine. You'll hardly notice the difference anyway. If you need to, that's a spot that you can definitely cut down on. The 2 bells, shifting that damage around. Multiquest are 4/4, 3 Chen Pos, and 3 Elsas rounding out the deck. Overall, I really like it. I like that this deck, the cost curve ends at 5. And for those who are wondering, that doesn't mean you stop inking at 5, right? Like, when you get to 5, you don't have to ink every turn, right? Like, you don't have to just ink every single turn. That's just not how the game works. But in this deck, you're probably going to want to get to like 7, 8 inks still, and that doesn't mean you have to ink your first 8 turns, but probably in your first 10 turns, you're going to want to ink at least 8 of them, ideally. If you have a bunch of uninkables, or situationally, you might not be able to. That's all going to be dependent on like matchups, gameplays, game flow, how it's going at the time. However, I really like where the deck goes in that it's just not a high cost deck. Again, it's really high in that 3 when we talk about the cost curve. The uninkable count actually wasn't too insane either. We got the 4 rabbits, 3 Zeus, bringing us to 7. 2 Fire the Cannons, 8, 9. Yeah, only 9 uninkable cards. So uninkable is really not going to be an issue here. So that's a nice thing. Again, your cost curve, you peak at 3, you end at 5. You're pretty balanced in your 1-2 line, and then also your uninkable count just being really, really low. So when you look at the deck build and how it's put together, it's a really consistent, precise deck, and it does what it was intended to do. So let's go ahead and look at what decks are topping set championships the most. Well, you probably already know the majority of it. Let's see if we can get it right where we want it. No, we cannot, but that is fine. So again, if you're new to the spreadsheet, you can click it down below if you want to be able to just view it on your own. But if you're new to it, I have the deck list. There's tabs in the bottom. We have the set championships. We have total format tops, the month of September, the month of August, just kind of breaking it up because formats change as it goes on. However, I mean, for the most part, a lot of the format really doesn't change. It's just minor movement and percentages. A big thing that we saw this past week was Popsicle starting to fall off a little bit more. It's been kind of going down as Green Steel has been popping up even more. And it's kind of funny how it worked. We were like in August, it was Steel Song, Steel Song, Steel Song, and then all of a sudden we see Popsicle start coming up, and then all of a sudden we're into later September, and now all of a sudden Green Steel is coming up, and we got that triangle format with Green Steel, Popsicle, and Steel Song, and then you had like Tempo and Ruby Amethyst over here on the side. Like, don't forget about me, I'm really consistent, and I can do really solid into most matchups across the board. So we kind of had this 5-deck format going, and as Green Steel kept coming up and up and up and overtaking Popsicle, because Steel Song jumped out to the top, Popsicle came up and planted itself up here, and then Green Steel comes up and goes up here. All of a sudden we're seeing Steel Song coming out. And now Steel Song, once again, is back on top. So what does that mean, and how is it going to go? Well, one thing to look out for is now that Steel Song is once again creeping into that #1 spot, that means Popsicle's going to get a boost. So now you might see Popsicle start to creeping up that little bit higher there. That doesn't mean for sure. We might see the trend kind of stick. We might see Green Steel fight its way back. We might see people expect Popsicle again, which would help Green Steel, or people are going to be like, no, people just aren't going to get on Popsicle. I'm going to stick with my Steel Songs. I'm going to go with it. Or you might just be like, I don't know what's going to happen with those top 3 decks. I'm going to go run Ruby Amethyst and just be consistent, or I'm going to run Tempo and just be consistent and be able to get up there. Over 500 tops for set championships I've found through ink decks, playing in real life, and Facebook, and people who have reached out to me showing me what they've done. And again, I wish I could just take everyone's word for it when people I see and they're like, oh, I did this at this tournament and this, which it's great, but a couple things of that. One, did it get reported to Inkdex? If it did, I already got it, so I don't want to just add you into it and then double count your deck. But two, it's hard without like any type of proof backing it up. So while I appreciate it and I love hearing about it, and absolutely I'll try to respond and talk to you about it, again, I apologize that I don't get to everyone, but as far as making it into the spreadsheet, we need a little bit of proof and event name so I can just check and make sure it wasn't already counted via Inkdex and things like that. So we see Steel Song at 17%, Green Steel discard at 16%, Popsicle at 15%, Ruby Amethyst at 14%, and Tempo at 10%. Being that 5-deck format, again, we got that triangle where Steel Song, Green Steel, and Popsicle are at 15, 16, 17% respectively. Green Steel was just at 18, whereas Steel Song was at 15, and Popsicle was at like 16, and then it just kind of shifts that little bit. The triangle's just kind of turning as far as which peak is at the top, and then we see things like Ruby Amethyst just generally being good across the board. When we look at decks that are winning the most, it's Green Steel still at #1, Popsicle at 2, Steel Song then 3, and lo and behold, Ruby Amethyst, Tempo at 4 and 5. But Green Steel still is holding that most tops title. It's just not at the most first place finishes. It's just not at the #1 total tops anymore. If we look at top 2 finishes, Ruby Amethyst was 16, 28 for Popsicle, 39 for Green Steel, 17 for Tempo. So Tempo actually has more top 2 finishes than Ruby Amethyst does, and 30 for Steel Song, putting it in second. But a deck to not sleep on is Lemon Lime Song with 9 top 2 finishes. Hyper Aggro also has 5 wins in its own, which is impressive. Hyper aggro is just always in that weird spot where it's like, how good is it actually? And it really depends on the event and your local meta. Some really strong tier 2 decks. So if you're not looking at that top 5, that tier 1, blue steel, absolutely a great deck, especially if you're expecting a lot of green steel in your meta. Lemon lime song, if you like a deck that rewards you for playing really well, this song is really good. And if you're into a popsicle meta, it's actually a really strong deck into a heavy popsicle format. And then hyper aggro, again, that's just going to be kind of dictated on what you go against and play, but the right timing of a hyper aggro deck can really just do incredible things. Like hyper aggro is just, aggro is, it's in such a weird spot because it's never going to be like tier 1 because it's so dependent on the variables of like your opponent, your RNG, and all these things. And I love Hyper Aggro because coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! I was a Cyber Dragon player, and for those who don't know, it was an OTK deck. It's a deck that you try to just deal 8,000 damage in one turn, game over in one turn, and it's very aggressive, very fast, and I just absolutely love that type of strategy. So Hyper Aggro decks are something that I always gravitate towards. While I don't necessarily play them often in competitive events, a lot of that has to do too with Hyper Aggro is a much easier strategy to learn. And teaching my 7-year-old the game, I typically give him my hyper aggro decks, and then I play more mid-game control type decks because it's easier for me to play those and then to teach him that hyper aggro type strategy. Then let's go ahead and jump into another deck. This one was also a top 64 at that 700-person event, and it is Muse's Songs Sapphire Emerald. I was actually at work today and came up with the Sapphire Emerald aggro discard song. I don't really know the play lines yet. The theory is great and the card choices are interesting. Something about me says it's not gonna work, but I was sitting at work and I was just bored and I'm like, you know what, let's go ahead and do this. Let's mess around with it a bit. And I actually have all the cards for it, so we're gonna put it together and at least test it out at home against some other decks and just see how it rolls, and maybe we'll end up actually taking it to an event. That's what we did with that color combination last set, and we went and got our Ursula with it. So you never know what'll happen. But here we see 4 Develop Your Brain, 4 Ice Black, and 4 Popsicle on turn 1. So we are clearly running that item package. Develop Your Brain just there as a consistency card. 4 1 Jump Ahead. I really like the 1 jump, how far ramp package. Like just on turn 2, like you 1 jump, you get up to 3. Then on turn 3, you ink, you go to 4, you play how far, you go to 5, and you get a card in your hand. Being able to get to 5 ink on turn 3, and also getting that card to your hand from your how far, like this is my favorite ramp package. It's just unfortunate that it's all uninkable because depending on what deck you're playing, that can kind of cater or like make it difficult because there's other uninkable cards that are just more necessary. I don't want to say better or stronger, but more necessary for variance in your deck build. 4 Strike a Good Match for consistency, 4 Tipo for ramp, 3 Fishbone Quill for ramp. So again, being on the item package with the Hiram, that's why we see the Fishbone Quill and the Tipos in there, but Tipo just being a little faster as far as the ramp goes. We get him in there on 2. So we're playing, what's that, 14 ramping cards. We got a couple bells. I really, really like Bell. Like, getting to 10 ink in your Inkwell is very easy for this type of deck, and having a 4-cost character who can potentially quest for 5 is just so strong. I really, really like Belle right now, and I think she's super underrated in just any Sapphire deck, really. Even if you just tech her in as a powerful one-of to close a game, Belle is very, very good right now, and I think she's being slept on super hard by a lot of decks. 2 Grammatala, consistency card. Like I said, the item package, so that we're playing the Hiram. How Far I'll Go, I already kind of talked about. Muses. Muses works really nice because you're playing the 1 jumps, you're playing the strikes, you're playing the how fars, you're playing your welcomes, you're playing Under the Seas, and just being able to bounce your opponent's characters is very strong too. You control their tempo, and then you are just able to overwhelm your opponent that way. Keeping in mind, let's say your opponent has nothing that'll get hit by it. Like they only have big characters. They have a Tamatoa. They have 3 Tamatoas on board. I mean, you're kind of behind. They have 1 Tamatoa. Let's be realistic. They have 1 Tamatoa on board, and you have Under the Sea. You're like, okay, well, I play Under the Sea. It's not going to do anything other than be sung, but it will trigger your muses, so then you can bounce the Tamatoa and get the threat off of the board. For your welcomes, it's just an out to virtually anything, or it can double up as a consistency card, being able to hit your own things to be able to draw if off of them as needed. Clarabelle, she's very good, don't get me wrong, but she's not very good in every Emerald deck. I do like her in here. I wouldn't mind to see some utility of like 2 of the 1-drops even, just like kind of teched in, not as a 1-drop play, but to tech it in as like a later turn 3 plus item removal card. And you also get that shift line. But I mean, I guess with the ramp, the 7 is not quite as bad because you can play it out sooner, so you don't need the shift line. I just like that versatility of the 1-drop Clarabelle. 3 lucky dimes. I mean, what do you... 1-jump's the only thing that hits off the deck if you're worried about hitting it off the deck. I don't like 3 dime. I like 2 at most. I understand not playing the 1 again because you really don't want to hit it off the top of your deck, but at the same time you can win without it, so it's not game over if you do hit it. I don't like 3 personally, I guess. 4 Tamatoas and 3 Under the Sea. So overall, again, not huge on the Muses deck personally, but as far as it goes, like you have your consistency cards, you have your develop your brain. I really like the 2-drop one. Looking at 5 to me is just for 1 more ink. I'd rather look at 5 instead of 2. But again, being a 1-drop card to just consistency. You're never going to be mad with a consistency card. I just think there's better consistency cards. Ice Block pairing up with your Under the Sea, so we got some nice synergy over that way. Popsicle synergy. Also being able to heal things because we do have a lot of willpower in like the Hiram, in the Bell, in the Clarabelle, in the Tamatoas. So both effects of the Popsicle really getting used here. Consistency, or I should say ramp of 1-jump, consistency of strike, ramp and Tipo, Fishbone ramp, Bell's a closer, Grammatala's consistency, then Hiram, how far, consistency, Muses and your welcome are ways to interact with your opponent's board. So we have consistency cards, we have ramp cards, we have disruption cards. Clarabelle also is one of your closing cards with your Bell. Same with your Lucky Diamond Tamatoas. Under the Sea goes over kind of with Muses and your welcome as your disruption / removal cards. So the deck really does hit on all the major categories of cards that you want it to. We have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 17 uninkables. That's not terrible. 17 in a Sapphire deck. That's really not terrible at all. We got one more Sapphire deck to go look at. Blurple. This deck took 3rd place in that big event over in Europe. 3rd place for Blurple. It's a deck that I was super excited for in this format. It's, I don't want to say underperformed. It's performed probably close to as expected. We have the Chernobog's followers, the Rafikis, and 1 Cogsworth as our 1-drops. Personally, again, especially with, maybe it's because Green Steel's so popular near me, I like the followers Broom, just 1-drops, just because of dealing with discard to get the extra draws. Cogsworth really nice there because you can play it in addition to another character. You play the other character first, then you play your Cogsworth, you give rush to the other character, and then that character can obviously rush and go challenge into something right away. And with your ramp, it just allows you to be able to do it a little bit faster and play more characters in a singular turn. Obviously Rafiki, the challenger, really strong that way. We have the full bounce package here with the 4 fox, 4 snakes, 4 rabbit, or 4 crab. Yeah, I almost said crow. 4 crabs. Again, I'm not huge on 4 crab, even in Blurple. I would go to 3 at most. I know this deck can struggle with dealing with threats and boards, so that's why you want to play crabs, so you have more of them. But again, I'd probably stick to 3 crabs. The library, I really like library in here. I know I've talked about Queen's Castle just overall being better, but with the ramp package, you can take advantage of that library a little bit better, and that's why I like Broom too. So followers and brooms just really doubling up on that draw power with your library because of the ramp. I really like the Great Stone Dragon in here instead of the Fishbone Quill because you're a more character-focused deck, so you're going to be able to reuse resources that were already expired, already went into your discard pile. So Great Stone Dragon just getting much more value than that Fishbone Quill would. Tipo, again, Tipo in here too, which is really nice with the bounce package because you can play it, you can bounce it, you can play it again, you can get multiple ramps off of the Tipo. That's where something like Mickey Mouse Detective, really nice too, but it's unequal, it's a cost higher. Being able to use your deck though, there's something to be said about that. What do we have? Turn 3, otherwise, again, the bounce pack is just kind of there. We said earlier how Friends on the Other Side is always going to be a 4 of in Amethyst decks. McDuck Manor. 9 willpower versus 7 is actually a pretty significant mark. However, the potential of the draws and whatnot that Castle gives you, I think I would rather go Castle. But I get it. I just think I would rather... I think I'd rather go with the Castle overall. I want to say in my most recent list, I was at a 3-3 split with Library and Castle. Again, not trying to say Manor's a bad card. And that 9 willpower, like, what is it? Fox plus Crab, one-shots a Castle. Maui plus a little buff, one-shots a Castle. Being able, like, or not being able, needing to buff Maui by 3. So what'd that be? Maui plus Crab without a McDuck Manor, but that's 8 ink. Like, that's a lot. So McDuck Manor, I get it. I understand it. I'm a little bit biased of the Castle. We see 4 crab. Gosh, these Merlin cards. I'm just not my day with them. 4 goat, 3 rabbit. I'd flip those ratios absolutely. The consistency of rabbit's just too good to miss. The passive lore of goat is good, but not as needed. I would definitely flip-flop those ratios. But what do I know? He got 3rd place. Scrooge McDuck, a 5/5 quester. Okay. Not that's a healthy stat line. Like, that's trying to look at, like, just thinking off the top of my head, like, what other card would I potentially play that would fit a similar role? I don't know if there really is one. Like, there's other multi-questers, and there's inkable multi-questers. There's Dolores, who can also net you a draw. But the 2/3 stat line of Dolores is just, it's outed by Brawl. It's outed by Sisu. It's outed by Under the Sea. It's outed by Medusa. It's outed by so many cards, whereas Scrooge is actually pretty solid and a pain to deal with. And if they challenge into it, 5 damage to them means they're probably losing their character as well. So I actually kind of like that. Like, I doubt his opponents really saw that coming. That's the spice right there. When we look at, like, deck cores and talk about, like, if we look at all the Blurple lists and be like, only one played Scrooge, though, it's not that good of a card. That's not necessarily how that works. Like, you get your deck core, but sometimes it's that one tech card, and that's why someone did so well at an event. So just because it's not played a lot doesn't mean it's not good. Like, that's a sneaky tech, and I guarantee you it caught a lot of people off guard. 3 Bells, 4 Elsas, the Elsa shift line, 3 more there, and 3 Hades. I was on 3-3 here, and I actually went to 3-2 with 1 Anna, just being able to exert their whole board versus things like Prince John, and like ward-filled boards, just being able to play Anna, exert their whole board, and be able to deal with them that way. Overall, as a Blurple player and someone who really likes Blurple, yeah, I like the list a lot. We got, what, 3-3, 3-3, so that's 12. Just the 12 uninkables. Definitely should play 4 rabbits. 13 is not that much. I would definitely play 4 rabbits. Again, I don't know. I'm not huge on the Rafiki. I don't think, I don't know. I maybe I'm playing Blurple wrong. I go for consistency in those early turns, and then the things like the crab, the fox, coming down later game with your threats, even using like goat as an offensive threat with its four strength. I get it. Rafiki's not saying he's a bad card. I like the broom a lot. And again, maybe that's because my local is more green steel oriented, so I could rather use that card draw. But overall, bounce package, like it a lot. Like I said, I would play one less crab personally. I'd probably take out a crab, put in that fourth rabbit. We'll get rid of my personal bias on the broom and leave the one drops as is. What else would we possibly look at changing? So one crab into a rabbit. Like I said, either 4-2 with castle or 3-3 with castle. I'd probably go the one Elsa for an Anna. Although I really like Elsa this format. Like, I think Elsa's super good. I was playing for a little bit there an Elsa in my Ruby Amethyst instead of the Big Sisu, and I think that's the correct call this format. I think Elsa's better than Big Sisu. Let's see, Belle. Obviously, I wouldn't have played the Scrooge. I'd be lying to you if I said I did because, well, you guys saw my shock already. Just seeing it, I understand it. It's a great card. I might put it in there now, but at the time, probably wouldn't have thought of it. But otherwise, just like I said, overlooking the deck, I would go one crab for a rabbit, go to 13 unequables, manor out for castle, and if you want to keep the 4 libraries, I understand. But without the broom too, I would definitely go 3-3 with the Queen's Castles. Other than that, yeah, maybe an Anna instead of an Elsa, but I think it's a really solid list, and congratulations to William and his 3rd place finish. I do want to just shout out, is it Michael? I was just going to come here and be like, oh, I forgot to shout out the Emerald Steel or Emerald Sapphire player. And of course, I'm not always the best at names. But anyway, sorry. We're starting to ramble on. State of the meta. Again, if you're still watching, thank you for the support. I know sometimes watching people in videos like this aren't always the most entertaining, but we're going back over to the spreadsheet to look at the format as a whole. So this goes all the way back to August 9th now, and for the most part it's not that much different. We can see like the top 3 decks right up here being Popsicle at 18%, Steel Song at 17%, Ruby Amethyst at 15%, Green Steel. Like I said, Green Steel's so far down the list because they joined the party that late, but they are at 11%, which does put them in that tier 1 category. If you're wondering, anything over 10% is what I consider to be tier 1. Tempo also at that 11% mark. Green Steel did overtake Tempo though, finally. 3 more tops this format, so it did overtake it to become the 4th most deck. Over here, disregard the order. The order does not matter. But then when we look into that next tier, again, it's Hyper Aggro, it's Blue Steel, it's Lemon Lime, discard, Amber Emerald, and then again, just kind of the rogue decks over here. That nope, I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry, I'll work on editing it later. But without just going through and reading the information right off the screen, like 1, hopefully you can see it on your screen, and 2, it is linked in that description down below. But when we look at the format that we're in, if you want your best chance to win, it's always, my advice is always going to be, well, what decks are played at your meta? What decks are played where you're going? What type of event are you going to? That's the first question I'm going to ask you. I'm not just going to say, well, these are the 5 decks to play, because depending on what your local meta is, it's going to change the answer on what deck I would play. However, it is tried, true, proven that Popsicle, Steel Song, Green Steel, that's the triangle format. Ruby Amethyst and Tempo are the 2 decks that are also competitive and tier 1. And then your Amber Emerald Songs, Blue Steel, Amber Amethyst, Hyper Aggro are all going to be your next group right there, with like Repeat, Ruby Fossa, and Blurple also strong tier 2 decks. There's just a little bit of a gap between like the Aggro and Blue Steel. And then rogue. Like, don't feel like you can't win with something else. Like, we have Musisongs, Jafar Wheel, Lemon Lime Aggro, Emerald Ruby anti-meta. We have Purple Steel aggro. Green Foss has got multiple tops. Ruby Steel is actually doing really well. It just had like 6 more tops this past weekend alone. Amber Ruby Songs, Princess or Heroes, Amber Sapphire deck. Brooms has a few tops. And Amber Steel aggro also with some tops. I just did a video on my top 5 aggro decks, and I'm just saying Amber Steel aggro was my number 3 for my 3rd best aggro deck. And then lo and behold, a few days later, someone tops with much different list, but nonetheless same color combination. So longer video, but that's where the meta's at. That's how things are going. Thanks for watching. Again, all that Metafy mumbo jumbo information coming to you guys. I just got to finish up one more spreadsheet, finish up one more course, get a couple things edited, and all of it will be live, and we'll see what happens with it. But anyway, I will continue doing this 2, 3, 4 videos a week, sometimes 7, sometimes 1. But anyway, thank you guys for all the support. Truly, I really cannot appreciate it enough. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below.